48 years ago in 1975, Saigon, the capital city of Vietnam, fell to the communists, marking the end of the Vietnam War and sending thousands of South Vietnamese families in search of a new home and freedom. Many found their start in the cradle of American liberty, Pennsylvania. And since that moment, waves of refugees from places like Nepal, Bhutan, and Afghanistan have planted roots right here. Most become fluent in English and American culture, and many have mastered the rules of the education system and entrepreneurship. But there are still plenty of obstacles to becoming a contributor to the American story. On tonight's program, we'll learn about some neighbors helping to lift some of those roadblocks for a new generation of freedom seekers. Stay with us. Recently, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, a county celebrated for its fertile farmland and famous Amish and Mennonite communities, received global attention for what the BBC called the refugee capital of the world. But just how does a refugee family from, say, war-ravaged Somalia or the mountains of Nepal or Afghanistan survive in a world so dramatically different from their homeland? How do they navigate this new world of minivans and Amish buggies with 4 seasons that include the inevitable ice and snow? How do they adjust to the food, find friendships, or find or even get to interviews and job opportunities? Tonight we'll talk to Danielle Bossert of Bethany Christian Services, who's been on the front lines of helping refugees and immigrants in communities around the country. But first, watch this.
Across the world, tens of millions of people have been forced from their homes by violence, chaos, and persecution. Their stories are different, but they all deserve to be safe, loved, and connected. And that's what Bethany provides through our refugee and immigrant services. Short-term immigrant foster care. Imagine facing violence, extreme poverty, unexpected separation from family, gang extortion, or sex trafficking, all before the age of 12. That's the reality for many unaccompanied migrant children entering the United States alone. They need a safe, loving home until they can be reunited with a family member or safe adult already living in the U.S. Home study and post-release services. When unaccompanied children are reunited with family in the U.S., Bethany helps them adjust to their new home and community. A case manager conducts a home study, ensuring the child will be safe with the family and in the home. We then connect the family to a variety of services to help them thrive, including healthcare, education, legal aid, and more. Long-term refugee foster care. As refugee families flee violence, war, and persecution, parents and children are sometimes separated due to death, illness, or imprisonment. When family reunification isn't possible, these children are considered unaccompanied refugee minors. Foster parents step up to provide a home for them, guiding them to independence in adulthood. Refugee resettlement services. Each year, thousands of refugee families are resettled in the United States. During their first 6 months in the U.S., we provide them with a vast array of support. Alongside teams of volunteers, we meet them at the airport, provide a place to live, take them to doctor's appointments, offer English language training, and even help them find a job. Our goal is to provide a safe, new community where refugees can thrive. Wraparound support services. Bethany's Wraparound Stabilization Services provide a network of support for refugees, helping them recognize signs of trafficking, reduce the risk of exploitation for their family, and address their trauma through counseling.
Wow, this is really something special. You know, most people watching, and many Christian people who self-identify as Christian in the United States, we aren't exposed to extreme violence or to danger or to malnutrition. I mean, almost everybody watching has eaten 2 or 3 meals, knows where their next meal is coming from. They haven't missed a meal in a while. Most people have a roof over their head. They're not worried about where they're going to be living next week. And most of us haven't been in war. We don't know what it is like to step out of our house and have soldiers or have bombs planted in the street or any of that kind of stuff. That just isn't reality for most of us. And what's even more difficult is that most of us watch this on the news all the time, And even for Christian people who love the Lord and who are supposed to love their neighbor like they love themselves, most of us don't really care. We don't care enough to do something about it. You do. How'd you get into this?
Thank you, Joe. I actually just want to start by adding to that, giving our audience a context. So I often like to do the suitcase activity with audience members of all ages. If I said to you, you had 5 minutes to pack a suitcase, you don't know where you're going, you don't know for how long, if you'll ever be able to return, what do you pack in your suitcase? And I do this presentation with audiences, like I said, of all ages, and it evokes these feelings of fear and anxiety, feelings that for many of us, we've never experienced.
Yeah.
And so going through that exercise and talking about the things that we packed and why we packed them and what the implications of packing those things or not packing those things spurs conversation about what it's like for someone fleeing violence and persecution.
Well, they really have to live by faith. I mean, so the Bible says the just shall live by faith, but for most of us, that's not something that we want to ever have to deal with.
Exactly.
We want to know that, it's planned, it's here, it's there. I know tomorrow for sure I'm going to be here, I'm going to eat. I have clothes in my closet, I have food in my refrigerator, I know where I'm going, I have a car to drive, I can get around. To not know.
Not know at all.
It's just got to be, and so these are folks who have to live by faith. You've got to deal with that. They come to this country all kinds of ways, but almost everybody coming here that is coming from some kind of trauma.
Exactly. And I've often worked with refugees who have told me I fled with nothing but the clothes and my children on my back. And that comes out of a group of refugees originally from Bhutan who fled into Nepal, who literally fled with nothing but the clothes and children on their back as they were being persecuted, murdered, and pushed out of their country.
Wow.
And so
when they come here, do they know how to speak English? I mean,
some of them do, some of them don't. We work with a wide variety of people, some who are from more rural areas in their countries of origin, who may not have as much English or even as much knowledge of basic human necessities, meaning they might be going to the bathroom in a hole in the ground. And so when they get here, we need to teach them how to use the toilet and what not to put down the toilet, like paper towels and kids' toys.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
We have other refugees who are fluent in English and have served as interpreters and translators in partnership with our U.S. government in various capacities.
But that also probably puts them in danger.
That is correct. And so what happens with refugee resettlement is refugees experience something called the triple trauma paradigm. So the original trauma that refugees experience is fleeing from their host country, right? It's being persecuted, tortured, children watching their parents be tortured, murdered, things like that. That's the first trauma. The second trauma is fleeing and living in what's called a secondary host country. It could be in an urban center or in a refugee camp. That in and of itself is traumatizing. And for refugees going on to a third country for refugee resettlement, like the United States, Canada, or Australia, there's that third piece of trauma of resettling to a brand new country, like the United States. And so all of our agencies, including Bethany Christian Services, aim to be trauma-informed in our approaches to working with immigrants and refugees because we recognize they've been through this triple trauma paradigm.
That's, see, most of us don't even know that. We watch these horrible stories, these terrible stories on TV, but the people also don't have names. And to you, I'm sure it's different because you know
Very.
People, you know who they are, you get to know them, and you get to know all about them, and you get to love them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I really feel that God has placed me, He's called me to this work, and I felt that for a very long time. I started working with refugees in 2010 when I used to work for Build a Bridge International, which was a therapeutic arts agency that utilized a structured approach to community arts as a means for learning Bible lessons, right? Developing one's own faith, developing one's life skills and how they integrate with the community. And so in 2011, we launched the Philadelphia Refugee Mental Health Collaborative in partnership with the Department of Behavioral Services, Lutheran Children Family Services, Nationality Service Center, and Highest Pennsylvania. That collaborative that I managed about 40 plus artists administering these community arts groups as a means to help refugees process that triple trauma paradigm as they work through learning the new culture into the United States. Yeah. And so I led that project, also leading the Philadelphia Partnership for Resilience in partnership with Nationality Service Center. And we worked with this group of Bhutanese elders. And it was that one Bhutanese elder, and I won't name him, but I can picture his face, who told me, I fled with nothing but the clothes and children on my back out of Bhutan into Nepal. And as part of that partnership, we Build a Bridge and NSC worked with them to create a wall mural of their journey of fleeing Bhutan, living in Nepal, and their adjustment and new life in the United States. The original mural hangs in the lobby of Nationality Service Center, and a large-scale replica was given to the Bhutanese American Organization of Philadelphia in South Philadelphia, and we had a celebration. But beyond that, I continued to work in refugee resettlements. I worked with Nationality Service Center, and then in September of 2021 is when I joined Bethany Christian Services in this new role as a state director. So myself and our assistant director, Megan Brown, oversee 5 offices in Pennsylvania and Wilmington, Delaware.
So in 30 seconds, since we're so limited with our time, do Americans, do we welcome people who come from other places?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Philadelphia has long been a gateway for immigrants into this country, right? And they have then gone out into places like Lancaster and Pittsburgh and Allentown and Delaware.
Are there any churches that have been particularly helpful?
Absolutely. In Lansdale, Pennsylvania, we had Trinity Evangelical Lutheran Church and Emmanuel Church of the Nazarene of Lansdale help a total of 5 Afghan families since January of 2022. All 5 families are now successfully working, living in their new community. It's wonderful.
What a blessing. Well, when we return, we'll talk about ways you and I might open our hearts and homes to refugees who right now might be getting on a plane or landing with nothing more than a backpack and will be needing friendship and hope when they arrive. Stay with us.
Learn more about Joe Watkins and the mission of this program at joewatkins.net. And tell Joe what you thought about today's program in the comment box.
Welcome back to the City of Independence. Well, maybe you can trace your family's American journey to those first refugees on the Mayflower, or maybe your family is a little more recent. But whatever your path, there's no question that God was in it all along. We've been talking with Danielle about the ways we can help welcome those fleeing war, famine, and all kinds of persecution when they arrive on America's shores. So tell me how you've seen the Christian community respond. You mentioned a couple of churches, but so many of us are numb to seeing these stories on the news. It's not at all atypical for a Christian person watching to say, well, that's their problem, or so be it, but there's no role in this for me.
There's certainly a role for everyone. I like to think about the different spiritual gifts that God has given us, right? And when we do outreach with and recruit people from congregations and churches to get involved, we speak to what spiritual gifts does your congregation have as a whole? What are your spiritual gifts for you as an individual? And how can you contribute those spiritual gifts in, helping other people, integrate here? And
so God, do you feel like God has given you that gift? I mean, what?
Absolutely. I have always felt a calling to work with people who are more vulnerable, who are in the marginalized communities. I have done short-term mission trips overseas to Austria and Ireland and South Africa, and have always felt that God has placed a calling on my life to utilize my skills and the tools that he's given me to serve others who need help. And with refugee resettlement here, the U.S. government calls refugee resettlement a public-private partnership, right? So the public piece being the U.S. government's formal refugee resettlement program, which was first established in 1980 with the Refugee Resettlement Act. And since that time, the program has remained the same, but there have been a few changes along the way.
Is it hard or easy for somebody who's just come here and has all these challenges, a refugee comes here, to access these services that the government offers?
It can be, and that's really where this public-private partnership comes into play and how community members and congregations can get involved, because it is essential that congregations and volunteers from our community partner with us to serve these refugees. So I often like to think of refugee resettlement in two ways. The first, if you can picture the spokes on a bicycle wheel, right? Mm-hmm. And the refugee is in the middle of that wheel. So our refugee agencies like Bethany, we assist the refugee in accessing the spokes on a wheel or the various services within the first 90 days of their arrival. Housing, employment, English classes, school enrollment, doctor's appointments, state ID, driving licenses, education. How do I pay my rent? How do I pay my utility bill, right?
Yeah.
The second piece of that, I like to think of refugee resettlement in partnership with congregations, churches, volunteers, is what I like to call setting a longer table, okay? So this table is a circle, right? Mm-hmm. Like the spokes of that wheel I just spoke of. When we ask congregations and those from churches to get involved and walk alongside us and refugees as they integrate, we are building that longer table for them, right? Mm. We are assisting refugees in accessing additional human capital, right, of those from congregations by expanding that network of human capital, right, and becoming friends and neighbors and mentors of these new immigrants and refugees. We are then expanding that table and that refugees' access to further types of capital, political, environmental, economic, cultural, social capital, right? Because those networks of congregations have their own networks, yeah. Right? And so when a refugee has fled their country, their bicycle wheel, their spokes are shattered. They come here, we help them build a new bicycle wheel, mm-hmm. and we help them build that longer table so that they can become independent and economically self-sufficient. Refugees bring their culture, their ideas, their entrepreneurship, their skills, their knowledge. They make us who we are in this country.
You've been doing this since 2010.
That's right.
And so is there a story you can point to of somebody who came here in just desperate circumstances and today is flourishing?
Yeah, I can think of two. The one is a gentleman, and I won't name him. He is from Eritrea, and he's blind and he's missing one arm. He was too close to a bomb when it went off, and he lost his sight and he lost his arm. And he came to Philadelphia eager to get his life moving. And it was difficult at first. We placed him with other members of the Eritrean community in Southwest Philadelphia who just, surrounded him with love and support. And through the services and things that, the various agencies in Philadelphia did, a couple years after he came here, he was an interpreter and a community leader in the Eritrean community, despite all that he had been through, and was someone other Eritreans could look up to. Mm. If he can make it being blind and without an arm, then others can make it. And I also think of one of Bethany's Syrian families. The father was a baker in Syria. And when he was forced to flee to Jordan, he tried to work at various bakeries in various capacities, but just couldn't ever make it work. And he has two daughters who have vision impairments. And so Bethany and our program worked to get those two girls into St. Lucy's School for the Blind, which is just an amazing program for children with vision impairments. And a few months after they arrived, we get the kids enrolled in St. Lucy's and Philadelphia School District Public Schools. Our employment team helped Dad find a job at a bakery 5 minutes walking distance from his house.
Wow.
And he's still there today.
Wow. Wow. Those are great stories. And God is able to use you and to use the people that work with you just to bless other folks. You know, this is what loving your neighbor like you love yourself is all about.
Absolutely.
You want for other people what you'd want for yourself.
Absolutely.
You know, you want it for them.
Yeah.
And so that's the blessing. I wonder how we can encourage more people, including people who are watching today, to join you, to help you.
Sure.
How do they do that?
So Bethany is actually an international nonprofit. And our origins come out of Grand Rapids, Michigan, where we actually started with pregnancy counseling and adoption services.
Yes.
We've since grown into this beautiful organization that has such wonderful wraparound services for so many types of people. It starts with contacting us. You can contact us through our website. You can send me an email. You can call my cell phone anytime. We have community engagement specialists at all of our locations. We've got a volunteer application form online. We do require background clearances and checks, including child abuse and FBI and criminal background. But we then work with both individuals as well as groups like congregations and churches. So if you as an individual want to volunteer, maybe every Thursday you're willing to drive clients to their medical appointments. Maybe every Friday you go grocery shopping to make sure that refugees have enough food over the weekend so that they can eat over the weekend. Maybe you want to help us with airport pickups. That is such an honor, being able to stand in the airport and welcome refugees when they first arrive, being those first faces, right? If your congregation wants to get involved, we have something called co-sponsorship, where we actually pair you with a refugee family for 3, 6, 9 months, even up to a year, and we walk alongside that church and that group of volunteers to say, hey, this is what the first 3 months of life here is for a refugee. How can we partner? You might have a finance team who might teach the refugee how to do a budget. You might have someone in your congregation who's a landlord who has apartments to rent. Maybe you have someone who has employer connections and can get refugees jobs. Maybe you've got someone in your church who teaches ESL or has been a teacher and wants to teach.
ESL, English as a second language.
English as a second language.
Yes.
So there's a number of ways to get involved as an individual, as a group, volunteering your time, your skills and those spiritual gifts.
That's a blessing. I mean, because there are people who maybe are still working, but people who are also retired.
Absolutely.
And there are people who may have money.
Yes.
Like if somebody wanted to support the organization, said, listen, I'm fully engaged where I am, but I want to support what you do. I want to make sure that people who are coming to this country in those distressed circumstances can eat or have a place to live.
Yes.
If we can send money, where do we send it?
Absolutely. So you can send it to Bethany Christian Services. I'm state director over 5 locations, but that's 3 branches. So Bethany Christian Services of the Greater Delaware Valley, Bethany Christian Services of Central Pennsylvania, Bethany Christian Services of Western Pennsylvania. Soon we'll be launching a campaign called 9,000 in 90 Days, where we hope to raise $9,000 in 90 days, because we want to help people understand what it takes in that first 90 days. If you have $25 to donate, that's going to cover the cost of that refugee's first hot meal in the U.S.
Wow.
If you've got $75, that covers a week's worth of groceries. Do you have $100? Can that supplement that refugee's rent? So there's a number of ways to get involved.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. The organization is Bethany Christian Services, a nationwide organization that is one of the leading voices on how believers, followers of Jesus, should be responding to the refugees and immigrants next door. We'll be right back with our great producer, Jeff Coleman, with closing thoughts.
You're watching Joe Watkins' State of Independence on Lighthouse TV. Positively different. Share your comments about today's program in the comment box at joewatkins.org.
So now let's talk to our great producer, Jeff Coleman.
Well, I thought this was a pretty special conversation. Of course, you and I share a piece of history. We are both of our mothers.
That's correct.
Immigrants.
For other places.
And so we can both have these conversations about my mom's experience coming to America was arriving in Alaska,
Wow.
and she had never, from the Philippines, had
Which
never
is so warm.
seen snow before.
Yeah.
And that's a practical thing, but then learning how to cook and shop and all these practical things. But I thought her opening was beautiful, saying if you had 5 minutes to pack a backpack, what would you include in it? And that forces the thought. We think about those things when we're threatened maybe by the possibility of fire or a flood or a storm.
Right.
But if your life is in perpetual upheaval, we had a family from Afghanistan at our home recently, and he was a translator for the Americans, and he had a backpack with diapers. That was it. And a wife, small child, and to watch them flourish because of the support network they received here, and then to see them post on social media about their trips all over America. I mean, just discovering, learning, and realizing you don't have to show your passport at the county line. How different is that? So when she talks about this so passionately about being the country of opportunity and hope, that is a conversation we often lose when the political debate on immigration rages. It seems to be that some of the casualties are the beauty of what it means to be a welcoming and inviting country to people who come in, especially asylum seekers and refugees.
Well, that's what I worry about. I just worry about, how welcoming we are. We talk about people. Right. We say those people. Yeah. But how welcoming are we really? And it was just a delight to hear about some of the churches that have.
My goodness, yeah. I think we're as welcoming as the story. As long as we remember our own story.
Right.
If you're a believer, to remember the story of, you once were, that makes it easy. Yeah. But then to trace your ethnic origins, your personal history, go to Ancestry.com and find out where you came from. You'll find out that your story is this American immigrant story.
Yeah, wonderfully said, wonderfully said. When Scripture says, you shall also love the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt, how does that speak to you? Do we have to be reminded that we too were once strangers and wanderers without a home or hope? But God intervened, and I'm so thankful He did. If this program encourages or challenges you, drop me a line in the comment box at joewatkins.org. I always enjoy hearing from you. For Jeff Coleman and the entire production team at Lighthouse TV, thanks so much for welcoming us into your home tonight. God bless you. From America's First Capital, Philadelphia, I'm Joe Watkins, and God willing, I'll see you next week. My mother had never seen snow either. She came from the West Indies, and it was warm, and she had never seen snow.
Did she like snow
today? Well, enough.
Joe Watkins' State of Independence is a production of Lighthouse TV, positively different. Made possible in part because of the support of viewers like you.